talk to us a little bit about how USAID is going to be working on private sector engagement under the new administration. And as Cameron had mentioned a little bit about the changes in our structure in terms of where we sit. Just the overall summary, I think there have been previous webinars on the private sector engagement policy, but just to set some background, it is, a policy that was passed 2 years ago, and it's a policy that focuses on an ambitious vision on to transforming how the agency works and how we deliver our results. The basis of it is that we want to make engaging with people like you in the network, private sector partners, instinctual, routine, and a part of how we do business every day in every sector. And so it's taking what used to be seen as niche under our economic growth cone and really broadening it across all our sectors. So, you've heard a little bit about the work we've done with health under invest, but also in energy and education. And we want to make this instinctual for all of our staff. And to do that, it requires a little bit of will internally, as well as capacity, as well as helping you all see that we're not so scary and there are actually ways to work with us that can be value added both to you as a partner, but also as a business partner. And then from our side, how we see the potential of enterprise-driven development at scale and the results in terms of our development outcomes. So in terms of how this policy will be enacted in the new administration, as far as we know right now, there are no plans to make those any significant changes. The policy has wide agency buy-in. It was developed across all of the missions, as well as with feedback from all of our bureaus. And so it wasn't something that we see as being driven from the top as much as something that we see as institutionally founded. And for this reason, we don't envision any reorientations in terms of the new administration, but rather probably you'll see more and more parts of the agency looking to learn and benefit from partners like yourself under Invest and Catalyze on what we've learned working with you all, what innovations we can share with the broader agency, and how we can make it easier for both you all and ourselves to work together. And so I think if you go on our website, you can actually see where the PSE policy sits. And I would say I don't imagine anything significant within that policy shifting or changing. I think the big difference perhaps is where we sit in the agency. Cameron mentioned that we are now a part of the Democracy, Development, and Innovation Bureau. And by that, it means that we are no longer in the old office of, well, we had combined ourselves from the lab and the private capital microenterprise office into one office. And so as a part of the DDI Bureau, our mandate is to really work as a hub to help other parts of the agency achieve scaling and mainstreaming in terms of private sector engagement and the how-tos of enterprise-driven development. So part of our job, and Cameron and I and Malik and others that you probably have worked with, will all be, looking to you, but also looking from the field on examples of where there were really insightful engagements and how we can take that to other parts of the agency and how to make it easier to see that, we can respond quickly when the tools are in place to be able to execute partnerships as well as alliances with the private sector in order to either mobilize private capital, but also just to, in what we talked about in the old days, like global development alliances, GDAs, just partnering together from a corporate side. Some of the work under corporate investment partnerships, I think, will be some things that we'll want to learn from. But essentially, it's to expand how we've been working with the private sector across all of our sectors and to achieve greater development outcomes. Some of the changes that we will be undertaking will be an internal focused exercise. So you won't see all of those, but it'll be looking at what we can do to build capacity inside the agency and improve business processes, procurement processes, how we work across the program cycle, which is how we plan in our field for the for missions. And our goal is essentially to make it frictionless, right? To make it simple, quick, and not intimidating to either our USAID staff or to you all, really. So I think maybe I'll pause there, because I think the idea then would be, you'll hear more of this as we go along, and this operational transformation is what we can take in terms of knowledge and learning and bring back to the agency and create simpler ways of doing business. And that can turn various forms such as training, but it can also be relationship management. And it can also be just the old-fashioned, what you'd be using the agency, which is called implementation guidance, which is like how to do your work and best practices on what we've learned. I think I'll pause there and maybe turn it back to you, Katie, unless there's, I'll there. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Sashi. Excellent. Okay, so now we will go ahead and transition into the next part of our webinar, which is our technical discussion about blended finance in support of COVID-19 response. We're going to start out with an introduction to the Invest Health portfolio from Noemi Danao Schroeder, who's our senior investment advisor that oversees quite a bit of these activities. And I know there is a slide to share. And just as a reminder also, please feel free to send your questions via the chat as you hear. If you have questions about any of the technical presentations, we can catch any questions about the USAID piece also. So go ahead and send those to me, to Catherine Sillahan, in the chat, and we'll make sure that we cover them as part of the Q&A session at the end of all the technical presentations. Over to you, Noemi.
Great, thanks, Katie. And Matt, if you're driving the slides, could you make that big so we can, for those of us who don't have our reading glasses on, so we can see the full screen on the slide, please? Okay, well, while that is coming up, thanks. First, I'd like to take a few minutes to give some background to the Invest Health and COVID response work that we're doing. But first, I'd like to flash back a bit in time, not back to the 80s, but back to 2019. When Invest, in fact, did not have a health portfolio per se. We were in pre-pandemic times when we actually saw colleagues in physical form. And we'd done previous work with the USAID Center for Innovation or Impact and Innovation to develop the blended finance roadmap for global health. But we didn't have the opportunity to employ that blended finance roadmap to any specific cases or buy-ins. All that changed in 2020. First, the obvious one, the COVID-19 pandemic. But second, many USAID missions were looking at, from the local level, about how they could use blended finance and apply it to their health work, but looking at it from an economic growth angle. So not from global health funding, which often has particular restrictions on how those funds can be used, but really how can it contribute to increasing investment in the health sector. So flash forward to now. As you'll see from the slide, that Invest has quite a robust portfolio of what we see as health and COVID-19 response work. We have about 12% of our budget is now dedicated to health or COVID response. And when we talk about COVID response, we mean pivoting activities to address economic recovery and resilience. About 19 of 55 buy-ins have a health and or COVID angle to them. And 40% of the countries where Invest works has a health or COVID-19 response activities. And today we'll be looking at two of those buy-ins, which are Italy and Afghanistan. So looking at one, COVID response, health, but also how changed or how has the current pandemic impacted them. Before we go on to the next slide, though, I would like to mention a bit about our non-COVID health work and a little bit of a plug. For those who tuned into Market Links last Thursday, our panelists discussed both the blended finance roadmap for health, as well as Invest's non-COVID health activities in Vietnam and Tanzania, Those are different. They are more addressing that local level mission response to how can we contribute to the health portfolio from an economic growth angle. And in both those cases, that's in the case of Vietnam and Tanzania, it was looking at how to sustain health services and health providers in particular when donor and government funding ends. So we'll be sending a link to that market links presentation in the next partner newsletter. If we can go to the next slide, please. So as I mentioned, we'll be talking about Italy and then subsequently Afghanistan. And in Italy, it's really a combination of a buy-in that emerged because of COVID-19, but also is definitely and directly addressing health, and in particular, health supply chains. So first, I'd like to address the elephant in the room that everyone asks, which is, why is USAID in Italy? If we go back to March 2020, Italy was the hardest hit country by COVID-19. The situation in China had improved, and the United States was still having a few cases, but not any heavy outbreak. So Congress authorized the use of emergency funds to assist Italy during this crisis. And USAID, as the agency handling and responsible for both humanitarian response and global health, was responsible for administering about $50 million in congressionally authorized funds, the majority of which were used for immediate humanitarian needs. However, USAID turned to the invest mechanism, and tasked us with seeing how could we engage the private sector and lead a private sector-led approach to increasing local manufacturing and production of medical supplies needed for COVID-19. So the approach that we proposed to USAID for using these $10 million in funds was twofold. And the approach was actually informed by other work we had done, for example, in genderless investing. And that was, one, to use catalytic capital to increase private investment in local companies that were producing needed medical supplies. And two, to use technical assistance to address challenges to increasing local manufacturing. So these challenges might be production, they might be organizational, they might be legal, they might be operational. And they also might be very technical, as in looking at engineering processes and so on. Next slide, please. So how's it going? Well, we did a competitive process. Many of you, I'm sure, saw the two RFPs that went out last year, and one for catalytic capital and the other for technical assistance. And from that, we made 5 awards to 4 partners, almost all of whom have never worked with USAID before. 2 of the firms, Dem Consulting and Rucucci Partners, both Italian, are focused on technical assistance. Interlink Capital Strategies, which is located in DC, in Washington, DC, is focused on doing the capital raise, so catalytic capital. And Pedal Consulting won an award in each of these RFPs for both catalytic capital and for technical assistance. So far, we are expecting to do with our 2 companies that are doing the capital raise, we expect to raise $30 million in the next 18 months. And rather than just sit in a fund or establish a fund, these funds will be immediately deployed to local companies, because the idea is that we are contributing in a very rapid way to increasing production and manufacturing. And I'd like to say, in terms of the capital raise, we actually are on target, or they're on target to complete them this year, both debt and equity, and from private investors that include EU sources, Italian funds, government funds, and again, a combination of debt and equity. And there is a robust pipeline. So pipeline has not been a concern for where to invest. And in fact, there's collaboration between our partners who are doing technical assistance and those who are providing catalytic capital. So, with these, and finally, we're providing technical assistance to over 50 Italian companies, many of them local, and the majority of which are SMEs and small, medium businesses. So why does this matter? First, we are contributing, or USAID is contributing, to a measurable increase in PPE production. So in one region alone, Campania, our 5 partners are expected to be able to produce 12% of the needed PPE requirements for that region. So going from last year, where there was scarcity, they have projected that they will be able to supply 12% of what the demand will be for this particular region. Another example is that one firm alone, in less than 2 months, has produced and shipped over 350,000 masks, and one company alone will be producing 33 million masks locally this year. The other thing that this activity is doing is contributing to SME strengthening. So one thing we learned from our partners is that the majority of companies in Italy are in fact small and medium businesses. So 95% of companies, Italian companies, are family owned, have less than 10 employees, and so have similar characteristics to SMEs throughout the world. So we are helping, and through this activity, we're helping strengthen their capacity as a company, not just for the short term in terms of increasing production, but also in the longer term, you know, how business plans, how to be investment ready, how can they diversify their production lines, and so on. The other thing is that we are contributing to the long-term recovery and resilience. The SME sector is a vital sector in Italy, as it is in many countries. And so by strengthening this particular group and also looking at how you can bring in investments, I think it's key to that long-term recovery in the country, as it will be in all of our countries where we're doing COVID response. And finally, we do see that there are replicable approaches. You know, for we do get that comment of, well, it's Italy, but there are a lot of lessons to be learned from all of the buy-ins we do and all of the activities that we undertake. But who best to speak about that are our partners, those of you who are on the ground, who understand how things work, the nuances and the challenges that are faced. And so with that background, I would like one of our partners to talk about their approach to addressing COVID-19 in Italy. So I'd like to introduce Robert. Robert is the CEO of Petal Consulting. They are a Slovakian firm with consortium partners in Italy and Poland. Petal Consulting is the firm that was awarded the two contracts under catalytic capital and technical assistance. So they have this approach that utilizes both aspects of that in a very integrated way, and also in consultation with our other partners. It's very tight. It's a very tight group of partners we have who are working and doing our Italy work. So Petal and their partners have really developed an interesting approach to using catalytic capital to de-risk, matchmake, ensure investor readiness, and to develop an impact vehicle that can live beyond invest in this particular COVID work. So I'm teeing that up, but I will let Robert speak to how they are going about doing this and what they've learned from it. So thank you, and over to you, Robert.
Thank you very much, Noemi, and good morning from Italy. I'm Robert Miskov, CEO of Petal Consulting. We're a European firm with worldwide local networks. We are serving clients in both public and private sectors on both sides of the Atlantic now. In Italy, concretely, we lead a diverse consortium of private stakeholders from business and also academia, which have all proven track record in capacity building, stakeholder engagement, but also enterprise ecosystems, as well as capital investment and trade. So our truly multidisciplinary team includes experts from various geographies with extensive experience in US-funded international development projects. And now through the constructive collaboration with USAID, we have raised to the challenge posed by COVID-19 and proudly contributed to the US economic collaborative leadership. With the USAID support to Italy, our target is to mobilize capital at 1 to 11 ratio. I mean, 1 to 11 ratio. To leverage USAID investment effectively, we decided to provide private investors committed to helping Italian companies fighting COVID-19 with guarantees. This was a result of an extensive co-creation exercise with the public and private sector in a very initial phase of our project. This way, we are ensuring that our newly established investment vehicle, which we decided to call Oxygen, which has a form of LLC, meets private and public sector needs and also addresses their development objectives. Now, such investment guarantees will be offered to interested private investors as a protection against their first losses in order to really incentivize investment and share associated risk. Therefore, our investment mechanism acts really as an enabler of private capital rather than a mechanism that matches private capital with non-reimbursable grants to prospective investees that really, in our view, to be frank, may in some cases discourage motivation and accountability on the investee side. So speaking in practical terms, Oxygen, our investment vehicle, is also serving as a matchmaker between prospective, largely institutional investors and investees. Among others, our support to them includes contractual negotiations, assistance, and others. As far as the investments are concerned, we have currently built a pipeline of 64 companies, which is still growing. Some of them have been carefully selected to pitch to the private investors based on our prior very rigorous assessment, I must say. We will provide 10 companies from our pipeline that will enter investment relations, also a customized technical assistance to improve their investment readiness and other capacities. We are confident that with the support of USAID, our assets uniquely position us to advance really exemplary private sector leadership in developing standards and capacities of supported investees. By doing so, we integrate an ecosystem that boosts opportunity and the capacities to improve resilience in responding to future evolving scenarios such as pandemics. What is more, to support its self-reliance, we plan to leverage our investment vehicle for continued sustainable investment into more private companies in the future, especially into those which are contributing to USAID goals. We really believe that this market-based approach will help us create a unique outcome and generate a greater impact. Our approach, therefore, represents a sustainable, unique model of replicable intervention with the potential to facilitate future learning, and we would be happy to lead on its adaptation beyond Italy. With that, I will stop here, but remain fully available for any questions you may have. Thank you very much.
Great, thanks very much, Robert. Okay, so now we're going to transition over to our COVID response in Afghanistan. So I'll hand over to Nadia Daoud, one of our strategic investment advisors on Invest, who leads the Afghanistan portfolio. So Nadia, over to you. Nadia, do we have you?
Sorry, I was on mute.
Oh, great.
Okay, I'm here. I was just starting to say from Italy over to Afghanistan, Afghanistan took a completely different approach to COVID. In the beginning, the onslaught of the virus, there wasn't a lot of information out there. The little bit of information that was out there was actually misinformation about the actual virus and its impact. The government of Afghanistan did not take any concentrated effort to get information out there to the public. Therefore, a herd mentality in effect took place in Afghanistan. So USAID, looking at sort of this environment, was thinking of different interventions, given the fact that the government was not taking an active role. We came up with interventions not only to deal with COVID, but the health sort of the public in general. So the interventions that we're going to feature today speak to that. They speak to the health of the public and the health of the private sector in particular. These activities are all private sector led and supported. So it's a little bit of a different model than what we just heard about in Italy. We have 4 different interventions for COVID response. One was really to get information, the correct information out there to the Afghan private sector, through working through the largest chamber in Afghanistan. We have another intervention that is really going to be able to provide relief with the vaccination that's just started in Afghanistan using solar powered cold storage units that you can dispatch all over the country in order to get vaccinations rolled out. And then the 2 other interventions that our partner Global Venture will highlight in a few minutes are really to get a multi-purpose disinfecting product into the country through a partnership with an Afghan company, an American company, and also to produce hand sanitizer effectively in Afghanistan. So I would like to turn it over to Emily King, our partner, Global Venture, to talk about the two interventions to support not only COVID, but health in general in Afghanistan. Over to you, Emily.
Thanks, Nadia. Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity, excuse me, this morning to talk about the work that we're doing. We find Invest to be such a creative and different vehicle for engagement in the markets that we work in. So we really appreciate the opportunity to participate. Global Venture is a non-traditional government contractor. We are all private sector with the exception of our work with Invest. And we have been in Afghanistan as a company since 2013, but for the principles on this initiative, several of our partners are Afghan private sector businesses. They're on the ground, so they've been there through their duration. And for me personally, I've been active in Afghanistan since around 2009. So when COVID hit Afghanistan, Afghanistan had a few challenges that other more developed markets did not have. And one of those challenges was access to consumer products that could help people prevent or combat the spread of COVID in their homes and between people. There is a complete lack of multi-purpose disinfectants, which are basically, we think of Clorox spray or pure, the spray Lysol that you can spray to disinfect your home. We did an initial survey as our first deliverable and found virtually no products of that kind available in the cities throughout Afghanistan. And with the second initiative, which I'll show in a second, with hand sanitizer, there is almost a complete lack of effective products. So while there were products available to the population that called themselves hand sanitizer, they didn't contain the actual active ingredients that make it useful, right? So the Afghan population had very few tools at their disposal to keep their homes and their persons safe and clean in a way to reduce the possible spread of COVID. So when Invest put out the solicitation for Invest 55, we at Global Venture marshaled our partners there in Afghanistan and said, this is very non-traditional and that we can't send our American team, of course, to Afghanistan at the time. So we put together a team that could do very detailed surveys in all of the major cities of Afghanistan to determine what products were available and how best to get products from the US, where there are many companies that are looking to expand their export of multi-purpose disinfectants over to Afghanistan. What we are doing is working only with products that are approved by the EPA on what's called the EPA N list. So they've all been approved to combat COVID. They've been proven to kill COVID on surfaces primarily. And we are working to put the American companies together with Afghan companies that have experience with distribution at the wholesale and the retail level. So our objective is to create a long-term sustainable partnership between American producers and Afghan distributors of these products. I should note that when we did our initial assessment, we did consider international brands as well, but what ended up working out is that the American companies were really excited about this opportunity. So we are currently working with American producers. We are a big fan of this approach because when we work private sector to private sector, those relationships are sustainable long-term, past any intervention from USAID through Invest. The companies only want to do this if they're going to make money in the long term, not just for the few months where they're receiving support from us. We are not providing any financial aid to the partners in this effort. So all they are receiving is technical support from our team to facilitate these long-term partnerships. So the companies are working really well together. We're providing support on the legal and the logistics and the technical side. And pretty soon we will have American companies exporting multi-purpose disinfectant to Afghanistan for sale in the commercial space. We have learned some really interesting lessons about how the Afghan population perceives cleaning products and hygiene products, and we're working closely with the Invest team on how do we message that back to USAID. Right. So when you go into a country where maybe people aren't familiar with these kinds of products and why they're important, how do we facilitate that larger that larger message, right? And make sure people understand why these products are important. So we started with 10 US and 10 Afghan companies. We went through significant vetting of the Afghan partners, and we're now working on verified opportunities, basically matched partnerships. And the goal by the conclusion of the contract is to have at least one partnership close. We are on track to do so. With that, if you could click to the next slide. Our second project, Invest 65, is focused on hand sanitizer. And the hand sanitizer issue is a little bit different. As I mentioned, when COVID hit, there was not effective hand sanitizer already being sold in Afghanistan. It wasn't a priority of the Afghan population to be buying and companies to be producing. There were companies qualified to produce it, but they had significant challenges in getting access in particular to ethanol. No domestic production of ethanol is allowed inside of Afghanistan by law. So all of these companies who were authorized to produce hand sanitizer were 100% reliant on the import of ethanol as a raw material. What happened though is, of course, all the countries that were producing ethanol needed that ethanol to produce hand sanitizer for their own countries because everyone was going through the same challenge. So what we're doing with Invest 65 is working with companies who are already licensed to produce hand sanitizer and have demonstrated through our assessment to have the ability to begin producing or increase any existing production capabilities that they have in order to meet the needs of the Afghan population. And we have that figure from the Afghan government as far as the total amount of hand sanitizer that they've determined is necessary for the country to be healthy and combat the spread of COVID. And we will be working with these companies to go through a similar process. We're assessing and vetting them, and then we're providing technical assessment on their capabilities. By the end of the project, we'll have at least 2 companies who have increased their hand sanitizer production or have begun to produce it. A lot of what we're learning in this project is, Afghanistan, like many other countries, is very dependent on access to raw materials. And how can we help countries like Afghanistan's private sector gain sustainable and reliable access to raw materials? And a lot of that is providing them with support on contract negotiations, logistics and supply chain management, and forecasting, because this hand sanitizer has to go all the way from production through to a competitively priced product in the retail market in order for it to actually change the way things are going on the ground. So again, we're very excited. We're very grateful that we have such strong partners in Afghanistan in this challenging time that are able to do the technical support and the business assessments. And we are really excited to see these projects move forward and make a difference in Afghanistan. And with that, are there any questions?
Thanks so much, Emily. This is great. So we've actually had a couple of questions come in. And usually we wait until the end of all the presentations, but we got one question for Robert on his presentation, and we've had a couple questions come in on the Afghanistan presentations. So I think what we'll do is I'll go ahead and I'll read the Afghanistan ones first so that you can kind of flow into them. And then Robert, I'll come to you with a question on yours. And then we'll go on to, I'll hand over to the CATALYZE team. Roland's going to give a presentation. And then there actually was a question for USAID that came through, but I'll group those into the end of the technical presentations. So now everyone knows the plan. The first question that we had for the Afghanistan team is we had one partner asking how they could introduce their multi-purpose disinfecting products to this program. So they have one that's safe, non-chemical, long-term, and highly effective. Nadia or Emily, I don't know if you want to talk through how offers can come to these activities with potential products that could fit.
Yeah, I think Nadia, certainly step in, but we'd love to hear about your product. You can email me directly at eking, K-I-N-G, at aglobalventure.com. And Katie, maybe I'm not sure if I can put something in the chat to everybody, but maybe.
Yeah, I'm on it. I'll send it.
Awesome. Thanks. Yeah, you can email me directly. And while we are already moving ahead with companies that were part of our assessment. What we've communicated back to Nadia and the team is we've had so many companies be interested in getting their product into the Afghan market. We do have a plan in place to continue introducing interested companies to the Afghan distributors. So we would love to talk to you and get you introduced to the Afghan buyers and distributors and make sure they can take a look at what you have.
Great, thanks. Okay, so the next question we have also for Afghanistan is actually a three-part question. One, please say more about the long-term profitability plan for these companies. Two, and I can repeat these to you, Emily, if you need. Two, has the Afghan government reconsidered their ban on ethanol production? And three, what measures have been put in place to prevent alternative illegal uses of sanitizer, e.g. conversion to drinking alcohol?
Yeah, so I'll answer the second two first, if that's okay. We have been, through our partners on the ground, in communication with the Ministry of Public Health and the Afghan government, and we understand at this time that there is not going to be a consideration given to ethanol production. That was part of our very first thought, was this would solve Afghanistan's ability to have a sustainable supply if there was domestic production. And there was discussion of that about a year ago at the High Economic Council and the Ministerial Council level. But what we have been told is that to date, that is not being reconsidered. So the companies will have to continue to import exclusively. On the alternative uses, aka drinking hand sanitizer, the way that we combat that is by adding in bitter substances to the hand sanitizer, and that's an industry norm. It's not just Afghanistan where that's a concern. So there are ways that the product is formulated to make it really unattractive to try to drink. And again, it's something that we are working with our partners to make sure that that does not happen. It's certainly a concern in Afghanistan and other places. But it's the formulation and how you make it so people don't actually want to drink it. On the long-term profitability, this is one of the benefits of bringing together private sector and private sector. They're going to tell you right away if they're not going to make any money and they're not going to move forward with investing their time and their energy in building out a new market or working with a new partner if they don't see the profitability. So for example, with the multi-purpose disinfectant, we just worked on a business model and financial models around these partnerships, and both sides talk about what they're looking for, minimum purchase agreements in order for things to move forward. The Afghan partners talk to us about how they price products, and it's a concern because what they're having to do is compete against essentially counterfeit or ineffective products that are much cheaper to make. So that's where the marketing and the education comes in. We have to make sure that the population as consumers understand why a product that works and actually kills COVID and other pathogens and viruses is maybe more expensive than a product that doesn't work. And that sounds simple sometimes, but it's a really important part of the problem, that we make sure people understand these products work because they've been imported from countries like the US where this is highly regulated and these are verified products that are effective. So it's worth it for you to spend a little bit more money. Right. And it's important to us that we make sure both sides are making a profit, because if they're not making a profit, they won't continue to work together in the long term. And that doesn't really help anybody. But both sides actually have been talking about products beyond just the ones that we're talking about. Afghan distributors are really eager to get access to high quality products from the US and other markets because their consumers, their customers really want them. So we see that as a really good sign, and I'm sure there will be a refinement on pricing as the product hits the market for the first time with multi-purpose disinfectant, because these are not present in the market currently. So you probably will see some adjustments, but that's a normal part of the private sector entering a new market.
Thanks so much, Emily. Okay, and Robert, I've got questions coming over your way. So the question, it's just one, and the question that we have is, we had a firm asking if you could briefly explain the 1:11 ratio in practical terms.
Sure. Thank you very much for the question. Well, basically, from the otherwise very generous USAID contract, we decided to set aside $1 million and use it as a catalytic capital, which, as I explained in my presentation, we decided to put our attention towards investors and use this catalytic capital as a guarantee fund, which would be used to de-risk their operations. So now, while on one side we will offer $1 million as a catalytic capital or as a guarantee fund to carefully selected investors, then they, in return, on the other side, will invest at least $11 million into our carefully selected pipeline companies. So while doing that, we are basically bringing to investors pipeline of companies which will go through very rigorous assessment, because we have identified these companies through really multi-dimensional evaluation, and we know which type of strengths they have, and we will improve them in other areas, also through technical assistance provision. So this is the answer to the question. I'm happy to elaborate this if needed.
Great, thanks, Robert. Okay, I'm looking to see if I have I see there's another question that came in that's a little bit more of a broad question than than specific to the two presentations we just got. So we'll address that one, but I'm going to take it at the end so that CATALYZE has a chance to present also, and then we can sort of talk. But so I think that actually is all the Q&A that came in specific to the two presentations. So thanks very much for that. And I'm going to go ahead and hand over to Roland Pearson, who is the project director for the CATALYZE project. So Roland, over to you.
Thanks, Katie. Good morning, everybody. Just wanted to take a few minutes to... Hello? Oh. Just wanted to take a few minutes to talk a little bit about what CATALYZE is doing in the context of a COVID response. And if you want to go to the next slide, we're really responding in the context of where USAID priorities and funding allow us to really dig into a COVID response. As many of you may know, I mean, we have 17 buy-ins covering about 22 different countries and many different sectors and development objectives, but the mandate to actually do anything specifically in the context of COVID really is tied to the funding and the strategy that pertains in each of them. And so I would say that although clearly COVID is a global issue and all of our projects are in one way or the other having to respond to the effects of COVID by changing capital mobilization targets or looking at different kinds of implementing partners who might have capabilities that are slightly different from what we might otherwise have looked at. There are only a few places where we actually have specific budget and mandate to specifically address something through a COVID lens. So, we're targeting that, and we just want to talk about, if you want to go to the next slide, two of our buy-ins where we indeed are doing something explicit in the COVID environment. So the first is our buy-in in the Western Balkans called the Engines of Growth. And there we're developing a COVID-19 dashboard, which was really sort of first conceptualized by our Bureau counterparts, and we've kind of co-created in the design and have moved forward and have a subcontracted implementing partner, I4DI, that is developing the dashboard, and we expect that it should be completed within the coming 3 or 4 weeks. And I'll show a mock-up of it on the next slide, but by and large, we look at four areas, four areas of data that we are drawing from for health, for the real economy, i.e. what's happening at the actual enterprise level, financial markets, and government policy. And initially, the dashboard's audience really will be USAID, Washington, and the regional missions. But we expect that over time, we might be able to expand the user base to other donors and governments and central banks, and potentially into the broader public and private sector, as well as potentially implement this in other regions. So the initial contract that we have for I4DI really is to develop the dashboard for the E&E Bureau and its needs, but it certainly has been designed with a view that the user base and its functionality will expand over time. So if you want to go to the next slide, we can show you a brief mock-up of what the dashboard will look like. Because it's a regional buy-in, there is a visualization at the regional level, and then you can dive into each country. And you'll see at the top of the slide, if you can, that this is particularly focused on some of the real economy indicators, GDP, unemployment, tourist arrivals, and businesses closing. Of course, the data are presented in both their absolute as well as trends. We are working on sort of a landing page that would show all of the key data per country in one place, or show key data points across the countries. So the tool is not, as of now, been built to be analytical. In other words, one could not juxtapose, say, trends in unemployment with trends in number of hospitalizations to see whether there's any relationship there. We deliberately have stayed away from that because, as many of you will know, the data are neither sufficient enough nor are the analytical tools available to begin doing that. But at least each user can kind of begin to infer and query and begin to see where there may be some trends and relationships, with the view that not only will this be useful as the pandemic continues to play out, but that this general approach of really sort of looking at health indicators, real economy indicators, financial sector indicators, and policy becomes a tool by which we can build greater resilience at the macro and the micro and the meso levels of economies. Lastly, if we can go to the next slide, we'll shift your attention to Sri Lanka, where we are nearing the end of a procurement and co-creation process, where this week we expect to finalize agreements with 3 new local implementing partners to really implement, as you'll see there in the bottom 3 bullets, 3 different approaches that are specifically sort of rooted in a response to COVID. And I would say that our focus and the focus of the interventions and the focus of our co-creation really has been about resilience and less so response. In other words, we're trying to build forward better. And so one of the things you'll see in at least 2 of these approaches is, for example, the incorporation of digital elements, which aligns actually with a broader non-COVID project objective of working in the ICT sector in Sri Lanka, and also developing digital solutions for a variety of businesses, whereas very few businesses in Sri Lanka, and again, this has nothing to do with COVID per se, but it does align with a view that far too not enough Sri Lankan businesses really are have taken advantage enough of digital solutions in many ways. And so this focus on COVID actually allows us to not only build resilience into businesses and supply chains, but it also allows us to advance our work on another objective, broader objective of the project. So watch this space. We, like I said, are finalizing these engagements literally this week and next week, and hope to see implementation start sometime in March. And we're actually already looking at another round of applicants for another solicitation in Sri Lanka. So hopefully in the coming months, we'll be able to tell you how these things are actually progressing in their implementation. With that, back over to you, Katie.
Great, thanks so much, Roland. Okay, so we'll go ahead and do, we have another period scheduled for questions and answers. Roland, the first question is actually coming to you, which is, who were the private partners that developed the dashboard for the Western Balkans region?
As I said, it's a subcontractor called I4DI. They're based in the region, which was part of the reason why we chose them. So they're a new partner. They had not been part of the network previously and were chosen through a competitive process that we did late last year.
Excellent, thanks. We had a couple of questions that came in for both Invest and Catalyze. So I think for some of those, we'll have Christy and Roland both address them. One of them is, are there any buy-ins that have used result-based finance contracting strategies? Roland, do you want to talk about that first?
Sure. I would say everything that we do in Catalyze uses contracting. That actually was a foundational premise of the Catalyze BAA process and contracting. And so, you know, all of our contracts are based on some sort of performance-based contract. And we use different USAID contracting mechanisms, but whether it's a grant or whether it's a subcontract, you know, whether it's a short or a longer term intervention, pretty much all of our interventions are at a minimum deliverables and milestone based, if not actually performance and result based. So, you know, like I said, all of our contracts follow that same principle.
Hi, as far as Invest goes, we certainly have employed a results-based contracting approach. I wouldn't say to everything because not all our work, for example, some of it is catalytic research that's going to drive decision-making within USAID for obstacles that to last mile investments, things like that. Not everything is appropriate, but we take a screen on every single subcontract we do and look at, can we put in performance-based milestones, incentive payments. And we are actually learning a lot about this, and it's going to be one of our areas of operational learning that we're going to be sharing back with USAID and with partners. Expect to hear more from our team. Katie can certainly answer specific questions about that. And I will stop there. And that is on subcontracts only because Invest doesn't have any grant mechanism. So we're definitely putting into our commercially framed subcontracts.
Great, thanks. Okay, another question that we got is, there was a question about whether Invest and Catalyze have plans to target initiatives for blended finance in Latin or Central America.
Oops.
Sure. I'll go, and Christy, happy for you to jump in. Yeah, we actually have a buy-in in Peru, and we also which is focused on the Peruvian Amazon. We have a multi-country EduFinance initiative in Latin America. And we also, through our Women's Resilience buy-in, are focusing on 5 different countries in Latin America, all of which, again, by definition, given that they're under Catalyze, incorporate some approach to blended finance. So yes, we're doing quite a bit of work in Latin America, both Central and South America.
And on the invest side, over the last year, we've been very excited to build a more robust Latin America portfolio. We certainly focused much more on the Middle East, Asia, Africa. We had a lot more demand come there first. But we have, and I'm sure partners have been seeing us put out RFPs. Haiti has been there from the beginning. So definitely on Haiti, not only the energy PPP work, but a lot of transaction advisory work, and that continues to be released as RFPs. Colombia is probably our largest buy-in. That is very much around solar and off-grid and energy. Expect to see more on Colombia. And then El Salvador is a new buy-in that we've gotten that we're just starting, and that has a number of possibilities for directions to move in on blended finance. That is in the country, El Salvador, as opposed to the Central America region. And the last very exciting buy-in that we have is the Eastern and Southern Caribbean, which is looking at a regional approach. And with a very much senior leadership attention from that regional mission. I would also say that we're finishing up and we have a little bit more work to do with USAID Mexico. So that's the Latin America portfolio. And we're very excited that Colombia, El Salvador, and Eastern and Southern Caribbean you'll be seeing things from them on the partner network. Thanks.
Great, thanks so much. Okay, we have a couple of questions that came for USAID. So the first one is, I'll read both of them so that you can answer them either together or kind of decide, Cameron and Sashi, how you want to address them. The first is, do you anticipate having a more formal brainstorming and co-creation process for institutionalizing the finance and investment network, such as like a blended finance BAA 2.0? The second question is, how are Catalyze and Invest linked to other USAID-supported private sector initiatives on COVID response, including, for example, trade and investment hubs?
Yeah, this is Cameron. So there are no plans to have a formal BAA process on FIN, although that's certainly on the table. I think right now we want to keep it informal to your suggestions, and I think it may stay informal, quite frankly. There's an internal process that's going on now in terms of thinking through how we can institutionalize this. There's no discussion of an external process, formal process. Malik, I don't know if you want to add anything on that first question.
Yeah, that is exactly right. We haven't really started to think through how to engage with the external folks on that. But I do anticipate that we will have to engage with external partner, be it Invest implementation team and a few partners from the network as well. I think we'll have to do that to making sure that we are covering all the bases in our effort to institutionalize the network. More to come on that.
Yeah. On the second question, there's no link per se. Invest was procured by the old PCM office under E3. The trade hubs and the West Africa Trade Hub are procured by different operating units at the mission level. Having said that, the agency is tracking all of its COVID work across the board. And there's reporting on all of that COVID work. I don't know if Sashi wants to add anything on that, but there's no link per se between two separate procurements other than the gathering of learnings and the reporting up on all COVID work.
Great, thank you. Okay, Roland, I have another question for you, which is, how do you define the investments that can have an impact in desired sectors? What impact measurement methodology is used?
I guess the best I can say is that that really varies from one buy-in and one sort of type of transaction to the other. We have a CATALYZE level monitoring, evaluation, and learning plan, and then each of our buy-ins has their own activity monitoring, evaluation, and learning plan, within which we identify both project and activity level outputs, outcomes, and impacts. And so, it varies from one to the next. I mean, every buy-in has a capital mobilization target, but shout out to Sashi and others on the USAID team and everyone who's very focused on this. We are just as much about trying to achieve development outcomes. And so while capital mobilization is always a part of our metrics of how well we've done in terms of our capital mobilization goal, we also are very keenly focused on a whole series of development indicators. And so in the context of education, there are metrics around improving educational access and outcomes, i.e. improved learning. In our Sahel buy-in, where we're focusing on youth and agriculture, there are metrics around food security, as well as building out farm-related incomes. In Sri Lanka, where there's a particular focus on women's economic empowerment, particularly women in the workforce, there are metrics around creating sustainable jobs and greater women ownership. In Ethiopia, we are focusing on digital economy, as well as agriculture, as well as women, and their impacts that we're measuring there. So, like I said, it really depends on what the buy-in requires, but everyone has a series of impact indicators that we and our implementing partners are actively measuring and working towards.
Great, thanks so much. Just so everyone knows, I see there's more questions coming in. We actually have one more section of updates that we want to make sure everyone gets before we may start losing people at 11:30. So I'm going to go ahead and just shift us into a few procurement updates from Invest and also from CATALYZE. And then at the end, I'll go back through and take the Q&A that comes through. So please feel free to keep sending it. If we go past the time, I'll keep the recording going so that we can get the questions answered for you, and we can follow up as necessary. Let me also turn on my video so you guys can see my face while I'm talking. Okay. So quick procurement and partnerships update from Invest. So to date, Invest has released 77 RFPs to the Finance and Investment Network. We've actually awarded subcontracts to 67 firms worth just over $50 million total. So we're really excited about just the number of firms that have been awarded so far under Invest, and the number of different types of expertise that means we're able to bring into working not only with Invest, but USAID more broadly. 38% of the total subcontract value under Invest has been awarded to U.S. small businesses, and 68% of the total subcontract value, there's some overlap between these two categories, has been awarded to what USAID defines as new or underutilized partners, NUPs. So we're excited about the 68% going to NUPs means that we're bringing in a lot of new partners that haven't worked with USAID before. or in very limited ways. We've made some recent updates to the procurement forecast website, which is at invest-procurement.com, and I'll send this out via the chat. And the goal of these updates was really to try to provide additional information on the invest procurement process and increase transparency around awards. So we'd like to draw your attention to a few sections in particular. The About Procurements tab provides now, we've expanded it out with a lot more detail on how the process works and who's involved in it. We've put together an infographic that you can link to. You'll just see like a little grab of it that you can click on that really just sort of distills the process that we follow for every single procurement. And it also talks a little bit more about how our texts are developed, who sits on an evaluation committee, and sort of how the evaluation works and for every single procurement. We also added an Invest Awards tab, which shows a list of all of our competitive procurements with information on the award. So the firm that won, partner, and also the value of award. And if you click on the RFP number, it will also open up for you the RFP and statement of objectives that formed the procurement. So you can see what the requirements were that led to the award. We also, in our News and Resources tab, have added a video to accompany our article on tips for writing an effective proposal. We have a video on co-creation 101. And then we also have a policy on partner network data protection that we've added there. This is a formal policy for Invest that talks about how we treat all of the data related to the partner network, whether it's data on firms, also the proposals that you submit, the technical deliverables that you submit, how all of that is treated, protected, stored, all of that, so that you have a better idea of when you're sending things to Invest, how we're protecting that information and ensuring that it's kept safe. Coming soon is actually a new tab on the website for live RFPs. So up until now, we always release our RFPs via email from invest_procurement@dai.com to the network. We're going to keep doing that, but we'll start posting them online also, so that if you miss an email, are new to the network, and want to see what might be live that came out before you joined, you'll be able to go onto the website and see what's live. We actually had a question come up during the Q&A that I want to just address during this section also, which is a firm had asked about how do we, are there firms that are sort of preferred, or firms that have some sort of special treatment where they're our go-to partner for certain regions or types of work? And the answer to that is really simple, and it's no. Invest does not have preferred firms for a region or a type of work. We release all of our RFPs that are competitive to the network, and we follow a procurement process each time that's now spelled out in more detail on our website. And so we use the evaluation criteria that are set forth in the RFP. Those are the criteria that are used to score all proposals received under a procurement. And then we follow our process. Invest and USAID are involved in all of our evaluation processes and making a final award decision. And then we proceed through our normal DAI subcontracting process also. So there aren't firms that are sort of, predestined to win work on Invest. So please feel free to submit proposals. Just ensure that you are writing really competitive proposals that address very clearly all of the evaluation criteria in order to win the most points and do the best in terms of our evaluations. With that, I'm going to turn over to Anne from Palladium to talk through a procurement and communications update from CATALYZE. Anne, over to you.
Thanks, Catherine. Great. So just to give you a quick update on CATALYZE and our procurements, to date, CATALYZE has released 42 RFPs to the Partners Network, and we've awarded 24 different firms subcontracts for a total value of $4.8 million. And these subcontracts cover a whole range of countries, 14 countries total. And 21% of those subcontracts have been to small businesses. And I will say that we are still very much in the throes of startup and assessments and have a lot more RFPs that will be released in the coming months. So please do continue to check the CATALYZE Procurements website, as well as your emails. And I will send the link to the catalyze-procurement.com website, so Katie can post that for everybody to see. And if you are not getting emails from us, do remember that you have to opt in. If you're part of the Partners Network and you previously opted in, you should be getting information from us on solicitations. But if not, certainly reach out to either Katie or me, and we can get you the form that you need to opt in to receive solicitations from Catalyze. And again, on our website, on the procurement's website, you can see what's currently live to be bid on, as well as upcoming procurements. So that's the update on procurements from Catalyze. We also wanted to give you a brief update on some communications materials coming from Catalyze. We are hoping to launch by the end of this month a new quarterly newsletter. This is in addition to the reporting that we do to USAID. We wanted to start putting out a newsletter that targets more of our broader stakeholder network, both member firms that are in the Partners Network, as well as other people who are active in the blended finance community. And this will have just various lessons learned, articles, and information pieces on some of the work that Catalyze is doing. And again, we hope to start releasing that in February, so please keep an eye out for that. In addition, we have some events that our team will be participating in. Our education finance lead, Amit Brar, is planning to present at an upcoming Convergence webinar, probably in March. They haven't picked an exact date, so I would keep an eye out on the Convergence website. They always have interesting events going on, but we will be specifically participating and presenting on the education finance sector. In addition, we have been doing a lot of work on education finance in the last year, and we've done 13 different market assessments across various markets in Africa and Latin America. And so we're going to be working on putting together a blog series, just discussing some of the findings from these market assessments, which we hope will be very interesting to the entire blended finance community. And those will likely be posted on both the Convergence and EduLinks, USAID's EduLinks website. So do keep an eye out for those, and we'll probably highlight expected dates for those in the newsletter that we hope to put out. So that's the update from Catalyze on procurements and communications. Back to you, Katie.
Thanks, Anne. Okay, I know it's 11:30, so we are at the end time. There were some more questions that have come in. So if firms would like to stay around for a few more minutes, I'm happy to go through those questions. We can also provide some responses via email. We're going to send out an Invest, like a newsletter out from Invest that has some wrap up and follow up from the webinar today, shortly after this, but also tomorrow, most likely. I need to wait for WebEx to generate the actual official recording of this. It takes just a little bit because these files are large. And then we will send out an email follow-up. We can put together some Q&A that we didn't get to today. We'll also provide some of the statistics that Anne and I just went through about awards and number of firms and all that. We can provide those in writing. We'll include the links that I sent via chat here. We'll include some of the email addresses that people were asking for. So we can take care of all of that via email. That will come from invest_network@dai.com, most likely tomorrow, but if you don't see it until Thursday, it's just because it took us a while to get the link to be able to share to the recording. And otherwise, I think we had a couple of questions. I thought it might be helpful to, one was we had someone actually note that it would be helpful for partners to know that if you are small and new to USAID, you should consider becoming members of the Small Business Association of International Companies. And there's more information at the website. I'll send it out to the link. I think that's a great piece of advice for firms that may not be aware of that. So I wanted to go ahead and say that. There was one other question that came through that I think we should address on the webinar, which was, are DAI and Palladium going to be permanent partners for USAID to implement private sector partnership activities for post-COVID work? And if so, would that require professional approval? Christy, do you want to talk to that one?
Sure. I think the reason we took the whole first part of this webinar to have USAID talking about the importance of the finance and investment network means that the finance and investment network will absolutely be, we hope, a permanent set of partners for USAID to address COVID. Both Invest and Catalyze are finite mechanisms. We have an end date. Our end date on Invest is coming up quickly. We are not going to be a permanent partner, but everything that Invest or Catalyze can do to address what Roland referred to as more COVID resilience, COVID response, COVID recovery. We will absolutely do at the request of all of the partners that buy into these mechanisms. So we plan COVID recovery, COVID resilience is, we all know it, investment's a key part of it. So in that way, we will continue why these mechanisms are in place to help USAID missions and offices respond. But it's the partner network that's the permanent partner, the permanent asset for USAID going forward on COVID recovery. Thanks.
Great, thanks so much. I see a fair amount of people starting to drop off, and I've gotten some messages from folks that are letting me know that they have commitments starting now. So I think what we'll do is we'll go ahead and stop now so that we don't start losing a whole bunch of people. And we will go through the Q&A list, make sure that we've captured everything. And anything that didn't get answered today, we'll make sure we follow up with responses to people. Thanks so much, everyone, for your participation today. We so appreciate the engagement of the network. It's incredible just to see how much these webinars have grown over the last couple of years, even since I've joined Invest. Thinking back to how many people we would have then and looking at, we were over 200 today. And so we really appreciate your time, your interest, your engagement, and we're really looking forward to continuing to work with all of you going forward. Thanks again.